Can you give an example of how one could work with Kriya Yoga if you're experiencing perhaps an extremely painful difficulty in your life with emotions or grief or something like that?
I give a few examples in the book about things that I've dealt with and how I've applied Kriya. And, I point out in the book that these are universal situations. And Kriya and what the tools that we develop in our own self to deal with life, it's universal also in the way that we can apply these things and deal with, emotions. And I'll share a story that I told in there, I just mentioned briefly here just now. When I lost my wife of 25 years, this was about 12 years ago, and all the great philosophy of life and death and, it's all a dream and God and all these things, they didn't help my very human heart, which was feeling great grief and sorrow and loss, and it's natural. Of course, we all experience this human emotions like the loss of a loved one, as I was talking about. And I learned that all the great philosophy of these teachings, the yoga philosophy, it didn't help my very human heart in dealing with the situation of the loss of a loved one like this. And there was grief and sorrow that was overwhelming, and it made even meditation difficult. And the practice of Kriya Yoga even was very difficult for me to do. And what I found was that when I used these practices in the right way, calming the agitated feelings of the heart with some very simple breathing practices, but then working with the technique of Kriya very consciously of offering this sense of grief or loss upwards in this inner spine that the yogis talk about in meditation and in prayer, that when I consciously practiced that with this sense of loss, that it turned it around, and it turned it not just into it going away, because we don't want to kill those emotions. Emotions are energy. And so what we're really trying to do is something that our great line of Kriya teachers talk about, is that Kriya, they say, is like a spiritual alchemy. And there's a chant of Yogananda's where he says, "Touch me but once and I will change all my clay into thy gold." And what this means is that, because many people, when they go through grief and loss, they try to deaden those emotions. They'll self-medicate with alcohol or drugs, or just try to avoid the whole situation. And that's not helpful. I mean, I think we all know that is not helpful, because it's an energy that has to be dealt with. But what I found with the practice of Kriya and all of these practices and dealing with this sense of grief and loss, that over time, by offering it upwards to the divine in prayer and meditation, even when it was an intense feeling of grief and sorrow, that when I consciously worked with that energy and learned how to offer it up in meditation and Kriya Yoga practice, that it transmuted it. It turned clay into gold, and it turned this sense of loss, of this very human loss of someone who I loved, and it turned it into just a deep, much deeper soul relationship with the soul of my wife. And it turned it into something that I value to this day, that just if I had avoided it and pushed it away, I wouldn't have had this very precious gift of this deep, uplifted, transcendent understanding and experience of that relationship. So this is one way that these practices can help us to deal with very, very human situations that we all have to deal with in life.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful and insightful.